Hello, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude at Beyond Mystic, and welcome to this Beyond the Vault special report. The title is today, Silver Gold Rush. With me, of course, to have this amazing conversation is the one and only Silver Guru. He's the author of the Silver Manifesto, and you can find his work at themorganreport.com. My guest is the one and only David Morgan. David, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Jean, I'm great, and thank you for having me.
Excited to have you on, David. We seem to be on the precipice of big changes. And at the same time, it appears that people are waking up in droves to the fact that our world is not what we thought. So, just a few minutes before we went live, I saw this article on Zero Hedge. They just got handed fraudulent books, quote unquote. Ed Dowd confirms our warning that Trump is inheriting a third of an economy. Between the BLS, everything we've seen in the last number of years, all the fake reporting, all the unallocated, allocated gold, silver supplies around the world, Dave, we're living in a world of mystery, lies, innuendos, and just a lot of BS. So I'm excited to have this conversation with you and start unpacking that for the audience members as we're waking up. And more importantly, I think the goal for today's episode is give the audience enough information in this episode to better track and make decisions here in terms of protecting their wealth and moving that wealth here into the new system that is forming just around us. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us here today. We are triple casting on YouTube, Twitter, and also on the Rumble feed. If we have time, we'll get some questions from the audience as well. I'm sure Dave would be happy to answer some of those a little bit later on into the show. So big thank you, everyone, for joining us here today. David, I want to start with this video. You posted this interview with John 3 weeks ago here, and I wanted to share with you guys too. If you haven't seen the 2 or 3 interviews I did with John Adams, they date back a couple of years ago, but they do set the stage for the conversation and the updates that David Morgan was putting forward here on this particular podcast. So, for the people who haven't seen that interview, David, can you share with us here some of the updates of what John is working on and what you found here, and how that ties into us doing the work here as investigative journalists to bring all of this information to the front, David?
Sure. This was a long time investigation spearheaded by John Adams. John was tipped off by an insider in this ABC bullion company that things were not totally on the up and up. And so he called me and asked for some, breakdown of the mechanics of how, a vaulting facility operates, what's it like in America, what checks and balances they are. Is it regulated? Just a lot of questions. And we kind of batted this thing back and forth. And then, of course, we had an NDA, non-disclosure agreement, because we had to do all this information under, under the covers, so to speak, because first of all, you could be accused for, spreading misinformation, disinformation, all the buzzwords, John.
Right.
So he went to work and would consult with me or whatever, but mostly it was his effort. And what he determined is in that interview, I mean, I don't have time to go through the whole thing, but what he uncovered was that it looks as that the facility was tipped off by the really the entities that were supposed to come in and do the evaluation. In other words, the cops called him up more or less and said, "Hey, we're going to come visit you here soon. Be prepared." I'm exaggerating slightly, but that's sort of the gist of the idea. And so the company had time to probably, and this is inferred, not proven, have enough time to maybe, get metal from another facility and stick it in the shelves and, on and on it went. And so this went on for a long time to get this far. I mean, once we, or, I should keep using John's name. When I say we, just substitute John Adams. But once the whole situation was starting to really get some traction, we thought that it would take, not much time, because you come in, you basically get a warrant, you go in and you audit the place. It's really not that hard. I mean, it's pretty darn simple. And what took place was anything but, and they kept coming back with their findings. Well, their findings were that all the gold is 9995. Well, we didn't give a darn if we care if the gold's 9995.
That wasn't the question.
That wasn't the question. The question is, there's a bookkeeping entry of X amount of gold. Is X amount of gold on the shelves or not?
Yeah.
We don't, we'll worry about the purity later.
Yeah.
Does A equal A? Or does A equal something else? And they just kept obfuscating this whole thing. And
Wow.
even one of the upper echelon in the political system did a public appearance in front of the facility saying, what a great relationship this bullion company has as, one of the great businesses in Australia type of thing. So uh, John dug down deeper and deeper, and really it's he got a political type that's my words, not his, that isn't bought and paid for, that's on the up and up, to start asking some really hardcore questions to the outfit that's running the investigation. It's called ASIC. I forget what the acronym is. ASIC. It's equivalent to like our SEC. And this, I think he's a senator. Um, really held their feet to the fire,
Wow.
and asked the questions like I just alluded to. Like, well, we care about the finest, but the question was, is it there or isn't it there? And
Hmm.
if it is there, did they gather it from somewhere else because you tipped them off ahead of time that this, is going to take place? And so, and the real clincher, which John is better versed at than me, but it absolutely needs to be mentioned, is that the facility was not um, cleared to be a vaulting facility. In other words, it was not under the regulations that are specified by ASIC itself to be I'll call it a class 3 vault. I forget the term. But
Right.
basically, it was a situation that no metal should have ever been in there anyway because it wasn't cleared yet. So it's like building a vault, but not having, you know, whatever requirement is fulfilled by the quality inspector come and
Right.
say, yeah, you do have a 12-foot, 12-inch walls, and you do have it rebarred, and you do have it, all that wasn't done.
Right.
So, it's just one buffoonery on top of another one. I know that's not a word, but it was just like a clown act as far as, what really was taking place at this facility. Of course, a lot of denial going on. It's really tough when you get a facility that's that well respected and been around that long to, start throwing rocks at it because, it's a big building and they've been in business a long time. And,
Right.
the whole problem, we'll go into it later and you can lead me or I'll directly do it. But the problem with a lot of these vaulting facilities is not that the vault isn't up to snuff and not the people working there aren't honest. It's just that it goes back to the old beginning of the goldsmiths. And in the beginning of the goldsmiths, people put their gold with the goldsmith
Yeah.
and they got a receipt. And after a while, the goldsmiths figured out that really only about 10% of the people ever come for their gold. So I can make up more receipts than there's gold to back it up and get away with it because 90% of the time, nothing's going to happen.
Right.
And that old adage has really carried through to the modern day, believe it or not. And, I did send you some things, last night about that. And this is where it's a real heartache because people trust a vaulting facility as they, should. And I'm not trying to imply that they're all doing this. But what I am saying is we have factual evidence that it's done more than once. It's not just one facility in Australia.
Right.
And we have proof of that. And this is the problem because large investors, well, let's take a small investor, okay? But you're retired, you have an apartment, you travel part of the year, and you just don't really feel comfortable putting your gold stash in your apartment because you're not there all the time, or you leave it empty for 2 months because you're a snowbird. You leave
Right.
Toronto and you go to Florida for 2 months or whatever. So there's lots of valid reasons why people need to store metal at a place that they can trust that's on the up and up and do their job. You pay them a reasonable fee. It's a competitive industry. You pay them X amount
Right.
based on the value of your holdings, and they hold it for you. And it's a very simple, easy business, and it's a very easy one to understand. But unfortunately, there's some shenanigans that go on at some of the time at some of the facilities.
Now, for some of the silver that or gold that was being vaulted and perhaps wasn't there, were they attached directly to silver bullion deposits in terms of the investment you just mentioned, or silver and gold deposits in lieu of pension funds? For example, here in Canada, I believe it's the same in the States. There are some requirements when you're taking your pension money out to invest it in like self-directed IRAs, for example, where people can invest that in silver and gold. Was that the case also where some of the silver and gold that was missing was directly tied to pension funds?
It's
Do you know?
been both cases. It's
Yeah,
been private, vaults for, you know, individual investors or institutional investors or anything in between, family offices or whatever.
right.
And then you also have a lot of these depositories that are pretty much a requirement if you're doing a self-directed IRA.
Mhm.
And there's one I want to say First Fidelity, but I don't want to misstate it and get in trouble. But it's pretty well known to be one of the largest IRA depositories. And they got investigated. They had gold and silver, but not the right amount. So they were short by, I forget, I won't give the number, but they were not up to snuff. And it came to the notice of everybody that follows this market that this facility, and I think it was believed that it was was in Delaware, if I remember correctly. And almost everybody in the industry knew about it because that's one. There's many that can do it and are authorized to do it. But
Right.
this is one. Well, let's just go to the big. Let's go with you know XYZ. Let's go with Newmont Mining. It's a big mining house. Why they wouldn't do it? It's huge. You feel safe being at the bigger bank sometimes or a bigger facility, and it was one of those, and it was not on the up and up. They did not have a match between the amount of gold, silver that had been deposited or at least paid for and what was on their shelves.
Well, the old adage goes, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. I guess it's still very much true today, and it's perhaps going to be even more true as we have more of these investigation unfold. And as Cliff was saying in a video just a little while back, he says, as we see these secrets revealed, we're going to see even more secrets revealed. It's going to be a culminoric effect. Now we'll get into the question as to why this is happening. Like Greg Hunter would say on USA Watchdog, it's too stupid to be stupid. So it seems
Right.
very much like it's organized. We'll get into maybe speculating as to why it's organized and where it's going. But before we do that, I wanted to bring your attention to this article I just posted a couple of days ago on Zero Hedge. Gone AWOL, a lot of gold here in Ottawa. The curious case of the foreign central bank's gold stored in Canada. Now, guys, I'll bring the link in the description box below. But here we had central banks reporting here from Netherlands, Switzerland, Sweden, Belgium, I think the SNB, and there was another one, a Swedish Risk Bank also. All involved in storing gold in Canada. And that was odd for a lot of people reading this report because we don't have any more gold in Canada. We sold off all of our gold reserve quite some time ago. So I sent this article to David the other day. I was like, okay, we need to investigate this a little bit further. There seems to be a lot of confusion as to what's happening. And I fear, I don't know yet, that we might be looking at the tip of the iceberg here to a scenario very akin to what John and you have been investigating for the last number of years. So, first of all, speak about the author here, Roman Manley, his work, and this particular article here. What did you make of all of this, Dave?
Well, I read it pretty carefully last night. And first of all, shout out to Ronan. I mean, Ronan's truly one of the good guys and does excellent work. And he's helped me. I mean, he's uncovered stuff. I've learned stuff from him. I've never said I'm a know-it-all. I mean, I got the moniker of Silver Guru, which is sort of tongue in cheek. I mean, maybe at one time I had, above average knowledge of silver market. I'm not sure that I'm the lead in that sphere anymore, but certainly I've paid a lot of time and energy coming back on point.
Right.
So anything he writes, I always have time for. And in fact, just digressing a bit, JEAN-CLAUDE, there was a time when we had uncovered something about, I forget exactly, but it was contrary to what was coming out of one of the main Wall Streeters on the silver market. So Ronan and I were going to have a um, a panel discussion with this other person on Wall Street regarding what he'd said or written with a moderator such as yourself. It wasn't you, it was someone else. And the
Okay.
guy was a no-show, and Ronan was pretty upset by it because he put a lot of effort. But I digress. I'll come back. So this is not that big a surprise. First of all, I knew nothing about it until I read the article. I did
Neither
look
have I,
at it.
and that's the hard part. I mean, this has been going on for years, and there was clips, little tips and clues here along the way that suggested there was a problem afoot, but nobody really put it together. And when I saw this article, I'm like, this is a big story. There's something here. So I have a few ideas, but I want to have your take on it because there's a part in the article where they're talking about basically through freedom of information or press releases from these central banks where they still have details the amount of tonnage that they're holding in Ottawa, and they're listing the years. So there's a couple of weird things. One, they haven't done any audits, which is their normal procedure when they hold a gold offshore, but they haven't done it for Ottawa. And two, for the years that they say they've been storing it in Ottawa, more specifically between 2013 and 17, um, the Bank of Canada there, that whole complex was being renovated. It was completely gutted and everything was emptied in order to be able to do this particular renovation. So even the Bank of Canada at some point has to admit that, hey, there was nothing in there. How come these central banks are still saying it's there? There's questions as to whether or not it went to the mint, which is about a kilometer and a half, 2 kilometers away here. You can see on the map. Some of our latest gold coins that we still had in the vault at the time made it through to the mint, but there's no ledger change in terms of these central banks now holding this gold at the Canadian Mint as opposed to the Bank of Canada. So, having said that as an intro, reading the article here, what do you think is afoot, David?
Well, my inclination, which can't be proven, so it's opinion only. So I can't say,
Sure.
well, David said it's a fact. I'm saying it, but it's not a fact. What I'm saying is true, but it does look like something nefarious has gone on, and maybe the gold isn't there. Or if it is there, and the most logical case that Ronan points out is that it went to the Royal Canadian Mint because it is only a stone's throw away and all that. But the problem with that idea is, and it sounded that it could go there, is why wasn't it booked that? Why didn't it say that, it's at the RCM, it's not in the Ottawa Bank? Because if it had been moved and it was your gold and you were getting your annual report, it should darn well let you know that the location has changed, but the gold's intact. And it never said that.
Hmm. Now, maybe 10 years ago, I went to visit this place in Ottawa, west of Ottawa. It's called the Diefenbunker. And so this was a continuity of government site during World War II. They were afraid of a nuclear type of exchange and fallout. And in here, there is a big gold vault. And so they did store some gold there during the war. Now, when you do the tour of this particular establishment, they explain that when people ask, well, okay, so if this place has now been decommissioned, is there a new bunker somewhere around Ottawa for the government? And the tour guides always tell you, yeah, but we can't tell you where. But just to let you know, yes, indeed, more modern, probably deeper, further away than any nuclear fallout could reach. But they never answer to whether or not they still could, in this bunker 2.0 situation, also vault gold. And when I read this article, well, my first interpretation, just based on all the shenanigans we've been exposing for the number of years, is I'm leaning towards there's something wrong and the gold might be missing. It's been hypothecated 10 times and it might have been used to, fund other programs that are not yet disclosed. But I thought maybe, just maybe, the reason it's still at the BOC and not listed at the Mint is because they're being stored now at this new continuity of government
No.
location in Ottawa, and that would be secret at that point. So I could see where governments would have said, hey, just leave it on the ledger at this point here. Don't do an audit, of course, because you're not allowed to come and see this COG situation in Ottawa. Percentage wise, do you think that's possible? Is it a big
Oh, yeah,
percentage?
no.
Percentages?
Oh, very well thought out, Jean-Claude. I mean, yeah, the Bank of Canada could have it. Again, I think it's fairly unlikely. I mean, I'm not a fan of Mark Carney at all. And, I see him that, just because I am biased, just looking at that picture, you kind of, looks like he's smirking to me, like, Aha, my precious. I know what to do with this. Uh, but
Yeah, they seem to be in the know. We could get to Mark Carney here in just a bit. Of course, he was the governor of Bank of Canada for a while. He went to England for the same post, and then a couple years after that, he worked into these crypto startups. And now, just recently, he's being touted as perhaps a replacement for Justin Trudeau. So we're probably going to have to talk about this guy a little bit more here moving forward. But yes, in this particular picture, they seem to be almost be laughing at us. But that gold vault, interestingly enough, at the Diefenbunker, people can go rent that now for like weddings and stuff, and it's pretty cool. The technology around how they build the vault itself and the security around the vault, just that you can spend half a day. So I can imagine what they're doing today and what was the replacement for this basically mid-century technology. All right. Anything else on that story
I'm
before?
going to add a little color to that whole thing that you just said.
Okay.
Almost off topic, but there was a place downtown Spokane here that was a bank, and they had a vault downstairs, small one, but it was enough for about 10 people, and it was turned into a restaurant. So I
Okay.
held one of my one of my meetings there, and it was pretty cool. I mean, only for nuts like us that are in the sound money and honest money and all that, where you actually should put it in the vault. So you said that, and I just sparked that. In fact, I hadn't thought about that in years actually, but I did it one time. It was a lot of fun. But anyway,
There's
back to you.
actually another bank branch here in Ottawa that did the same thing. It closed down long ago, but it was one of these old Ionic columns, like the Greek kind of design buildings, and they also have a vault downstairs that they transfer and rent out for restaurant groups. So I've actually been in there. It was kind of cool, like you. It's kind of cool, and you eat with gold forks and stuff, and I don't know. It's kind of fun. But anyways, we digress. Okay, thank you for that. So we'll stay on top of this story, and I hope more information comes out because it's very possible. Like if you follow the research of Big Swear, that some of this gold and silver might have been used for different things, like in the war effort. The silver in the States was used for the Manhattan Project. All of this was classified. The fact that the silver had been moved and was no longer backing the certificates also was classified. And this all came out years after the fact. So, is it possible that these gold deposits from these other countries also have been used for something else here, either in Canada or perhaps in the States, or any suppression scheme? Very well, might maybe. So, what's interesting is that Cliff High's report in the last couple of days is suggesting that we could have a big shock here moving forward in the financial system that would bring basically bankers to jump off buildings. I thought that was very interesting. It's very reminiscent of the 1930s. But let me see if I can get to this particular tweet he posted on November 7. So these were data sets, and he had kind of like dates as the beginning of the energies for all of these different headlines. Secrets Revealed brings up money, guns, and lawyers in unexpected cases. That will be an introduction into financial secrets revealed at a global level. People will freak out when they see their secrets on X and flee and go into hiding and go off a grid. Perhaps also, take um, parachute lessons without parachutes or flying lessons without parachutes. So we'll see here moving forward. But what do you make of that? This idea that uh, justice could be just around the corner here. We already have the White House suggesting that they have cookbooks. This might be coming up. We're seeing what's happening with the campaign. Kamala had raised $1 billion, yet she's already $20 million in debt with her campaign. There seems to be a lot of money that's missing, to say nothing about the Pentagon and what Catherine Austin Fitz has been looking at for a number of years of all of this money that's unaccounted for. Do you think we're on that verge, Dave, of having a real resolution of all of this, or are we just going to mop this up, maybe give us one or two bones here to bite on, and we're going to forget all about this? Or are we in maybe for a big, big, big revelation here of these financial secrets?
My instinct is what Cliff wrote is correct. There's, I don't have a really good analogy, Jean Claude, but it's, getting into the inner vault. In fact, one of the facility that I use has a vault within a vault. It's got a gold vault that's a complete vault by itself, but it's within the silver vault. So the idea is this, that as you go deeper and deeper and deeper, and that you unravel more and more, it starts to accelerate. In other words, once you get that final door, there's no more secrets to be had. So if you have unraveled this mystery, the next one, and there's only one more to go, then all of a sudden the light shines on everything. All of a sudden, it's like, oh my God, there's that. Oh, there's not just rats or skunks, there's whatever. Poor
Right.
analogy, but you get the idea because what happens is in a complex system, as you start to find out more and more, since there's so many connections, once you hit that node, let's say, and there's six things off of it, you see all six all at once. And all of a sudden, that leads to that, leads to that. They're all interconnected. So once you find out that one, oh, that guy too, and oh, he's with her, and on it goes. So probably it's corny, I'm trying to do a good job here, but the idea is, yeah, I absolutely think that we will see more and more come out at a faster and faster rate. It'll accelerate.
Yeah, he also suggested that with the death of the dollar, we're seeing that happen in real time right now. We can maybe talk about the BRICS a little bit here at the end of the show, but we're seeing more and more pressure on the US dollar and its capability perhaps to keep all of these secrets and the bribe mechanisms and all that. And as that dies, more secrets come out, and it's just going to add to the Common-Eric effect you just mentioned. Now, in one of my interviews, maybe a month or two ago, with Andy Scheckman here on Beyond the Vault, he was reporting the fact that we're starting to see more and more industry circumvent the COMEX and the LME in these exchanges, and they're buying doré direct from the miners. And so this is not being accounted for, of course, in the price mechanisms right now, but it was an indication as to where perhaps things are going and that people are front running either something that's about to happen or a fact that maybe we're running out of silver at these exchanges and people are going directly to the source. Now, on top of that, I want your comments on that. On top of that, we're having weird things happen where there's a theft happening also. Here, 240 tons Newmont concentrate was stolen in Mexico just on November 6th. So there seems to be a lot of interest, even though the mainstream news is telling us these are pet rocks. We're seeing people go through a lot of trouble stealing concentrate in this case, but also the industry now moving and circumventing around these exchanges to get the doré directly from the facility. What is that spelling out? Why is this happening right now, David?
Well, I think that it's happening because people that are in the know, especially from the industrial side, see the future, and that is that the supply chain is getting tighter and tighter as far as the amount of silver being mined versus amount of silver being needed for industry. So let me back you up a little bit. Samsung has had a relationship with Avino Mines for years. So Avino is a junior producer. Followed the company for years, know the CEO quite well, and they do a good job of mining. And I don't know what the contract is. I'm not privileged to see it. I imagine, though, it's probably something like we'll pay you on a quarterly basis the average quarterly price of silver, and I would put a sweetener in there plus 10 cents the ounce, 15 cents the ounce. Reason now this is me. I'm not saying that the contract reads. I've never seen it. I'm not authorized to
You're
see it.
taking an educated guess.
But I'm taking an educated guess because why would you make that kind of a deal if you're gonna, you know, be underwater or whatever. So
Right.
so they've done that for years. So that's one. And I thought, wow, this is very interesting. A major industrial user that needs silver goes direct to the miner, which is the most efficient way to do it. Probably pays a bit of a premium to just
Mm.
keep both sides happy. And yet it's not done, to my knowledge, very much at all, other than that one. I'm sure there could be others I'm not aware of. And then what you've just outlined is you talk to some of the CEOs of some of these other junior producers, and they're spot on that these other companies are going and getting doré. And doré, for those that don't know, is just usually a crude pour of metal at the mine itself. You have high enough grade, you can smelt it down. Comes in kind of ugly bricks. There's no, they're not real shiny and pretty looking, but they're very, very valuable. And then that doré gets re-refined at a refiner and turns into 999 fine, silver, gold, or whatever. So most doré has usually silver and gold in it. It could be silver and another element or two. It's not pure, but it's like 90% pure. But it's a great way, especially if you're an industrial user and you have to re-refine it anyway. Because what a lot of people don't know about the silver industry, it's kind of common sense when you think about it, is what does the industrial side look like? Well, it's not a 1,000-ounce bar, and it's not a silver chain. It's not a silver ring. It's mesh, it's shot, it's wire, it's liquids. All these industrial uses that silver has, 10,000 different uses for. I'm not saying there's 10,000 different types and forms of silver for industrial purposes, but there's many that people wouldn't even know that was silver being used. And that's when they take the raw silver and turn it into products that are used in the electronics industry, the gaming industry, circuitry, membrane switches, photovoltaics. I mean, all this stuff, silver paste. I mean, so if you get the doré and you're gonna have to refine it anyway to make silver paste, as an example, which is probably a good example. Heck, you're gonna have to put it from a 999 form anyway. Why not take the 90 and do what you need?
Right.
So really, I think it is advantageous for two reasons. It may save them cost. I'm guessing that, but it eliminates, let's say, some carrying cost of going to a you know a wholesaler and buying your bars and having it shipped and then sending it out to someone that can make it in take to your facility to make these various forms that you need for your market. You're an industrial provider for paste, wire, shot, all these things that you use in the industrial side.
But what I'm getting at, and I understand that there's value there, is there also a component of industry that is seeing, like what we are seeing here, just looking at the surface level, the COMEX, where the physical inventory has been on the down draw for the last number of years, and they're trying to maybe secure silver before that gets to zero and finding other solutions to do it, on top of maybe finding some efficiencies. Do you see that
Yeah.
also as part of the
No,
strategy?
I did answer that, probably not succinctly, but yes, the answer is absolutely.
Okay.
And, and the other part of it is that Comex is a warehouse, and it really doesn't. It's sort of the seller of last resort. It's sort of like if you can't find it anywhere else, you'll take delivery off it. Not that they don't make deliveries, they do. But like all commodities, only a few percent ever comes off the commodities exchange itself.
Right.
I used to, early in my studies, I thought like almost everything went through the Comex. It's like Monopoly. You had to go past go to get your $200. And then as I learned more, I understood that no, it's more
Right.
like a showroom. You go into your Mercedes dealer in Toronto downtown. You see the new black Mercedes, and you say I want to buy it. Say, no, that's a showroom model. We'll
Right.
get you your model, and you got to wait 6 weeks. And they
So
call it
now
the
there's
back.
supply issues to where even the showroom doesn't have the model on
That's about it.
the right.
Yeah. So,
Okay.
so of course, if you are someone that's in need of it to keep your business going, you're going to look for, well, where else can I go? And that's traditionally been, the smelters. A direct relationship with an industrial user might go to a smelter, might go
Right.
to refiner. And now that we're on the word refining, I want to point out something going back to circle back to the earlier conversation. And this is not really talked about very much. In fact, I don't think very few of us have really mentioned it. But do you remember Melody's, I'm going to guess time, 6, 7 years ago, where the Chinese were saying that they were going to refine all of their gold into kilos, and
Yes.
that kilo gold, you know why that happened?
They were changing the value. Was it because of the incoming demand from India, and they were also looking at no? Why was that?
Because they were getting bars that weren't 9999 fine.
It was tungsten, or
Some of it,
yeah.
and then some of it was coin melt that's 90% gold, not 100%.
Ah.
But they never said that, and they never will.
Hmm.
But so what do you
I
do?
wonder how much they lost
I don't know.
on the remelt. Yeah. Wow.
So, and it costs. I mean, why would you take 999 fine gold and refine it into 999 fine gold?
Right.
Well, you probably wouldn't. But if you'd been burned, you want to make from this point on everything that's coming into us, we're going to refine it at our expense. Or maybe it was on the other. I don't know who paid for it. I imagine Chinese, but I'm not certain of that. To
Right.
make sure every kilo you got is what it's stamped to be. So I just had to throw that in there because, a lot of people know about, the paper silver markets and, a lot of the shenanigans going on, and they've seen the lawsuits and, no one's ever said guilty. They've just paid fines.
Right.
But you don't hear too much on the gold side.
Right.
And yet, is there as much on the gold side as the silver side? The answer is I do not know. But what I do know is there's more there than most people would suspect.
And it's happening at the physical level, not
Yeah.
just with the paper derivatives. Now, on that note, do you think? Let me backtrack here. Um, do you think it's possible when was the cover story at the time though? Am I getting that right? That they were talking about new demand coming from India and they wanted to
Yeah,
standardize to
yeah,
one
they had
kilo,
some. Yeah, your memory's better than mine, but yeah, they had a kind of what I consider a cover story.
like
And
a
I'm not
cover
saying it
story?
was a great amount. It
Yeah,
might have been one tungsten bar. I don't know.
yeah.
I suspect it was enough to where, look, from now on, we're making sure what our product is.
Before I go to the next point, we've talked about the depositories being empty or playing fast and loose here with people's gold and silver. We've talked about these exchanges now running on dry. The showrooms are running out of show products. Before we get into the price manipulation, you just mentioned here some of these shenanigans, and I wanted to know, and the cover stories. If you buy it right now, like there's a big push over the last number of months. If you read the financial news, that these countries are hoarding or buying extra silver for photovoltaics. They're all saying that that's why they're buying silver. They're expecting this big solar wave ahead of them. When I talked to Andy about that, he says, "Yeah, yeah, but not necessarily." And here in the States, also, Trump seems to be going to be reversing a lot of the green initiatives of Biden. So that doesn't seem to be a big push. Is there perhaps either a militaristic or maybe new electrics, as Cliff High talks about, that's just around the corner? And this is why really they're hoarding gold and silver, but mostly silver right now? Is that a cover story, the photovoltaics?
It could be. I what we know is that the military uses a fairly significant amount of silver. And there's never been a breakdown in any of the studies that I know exist, CPM Group, the Silver Institute, Metals Focus. Handy and Hardman used to do one, which you don't even know that name. They're a refiner. And Johnson Matthey, also a refiner, used to put out some information. And the best of my memory, I mean, some of the early Handy and Hardman used to give like a line item for military use, if I remember correctly.
And
So
nowadays, that's pretty much
you
obfuscated. You
never
can't,
see it. You
you
never
never,
see the word military anywhere.
right.
So, like it says batteries, okay? So they use
Mhm.
this much silver for batteries. Okay, well, that's not all pacemakers and hearing aids, right?
Right, right,
A
right.
lot of those are batteries for military, but it's under the nomenclature battery. You look at photovoltaics. All right, well, how many solar panels does the Army use, out in the field, for communications, whatever? What
Mhm.
about the amount of solar used for satellites? I mean, they're up there. What do they do? First thing they do is they put out
Right.
solar panels, right?
In
So
the
it's all of these line items that doesn't qualify it as military use because the numbers, I think the numbers, and I know Bix and I disagree on this, but I think it's pretty hard to fudge the numbers of mining companies. I mean, they have to report to their shareholders, they're audited. So I think the mining industry at large is pretty accurate. Now, there's burrow mining, there's people in Mexico and other places in the world that are hand mining stuff, and there's more out of the ground than what's reported in these reports. Yeah, probably,
Sure, sure,
but
yeah,
it's in a small percentage. It's not like 10 times as much as they report or something
right.
ridiculous like that. And then, of course, the usage. So the use has to really be pretty accurate. And so they figured out, let's say the Silver Institute or whatever, and I don't know if they're doing this deliberately or not, but so you got to think when you're reading it, okay, battery, who uses batteries? Well, military probably uses most of the battery
Mhm.
silver. Who uses most photovoltaics? Well, that would be residential and commercial. That wouldn't be military. But what component of it is military? 20%, 30%, 10%? I don't know. But it's not 1%.
Right.
you know so that's where they get around it, so it's not specified out, but to think that it's additional to what they're showing us, I don't fly with that.
Okay.
People that are indicating that what the silver group shows as use for silver on the industrial side is that industrial only, and on top of that there's X amount for military added to it. No, it's in the numbers
It's in the
between
number.
all the uses. It's in the numbers as far as I can tell. And I've been looking at this, as you know, probably longer than anybody my age, but that's the way I see it.
And is it possible in the same case as in World War II, for example, all the silver going to the Manhattan Project, that as we're seeing now, maybe industry getting into and buying directly from the silver miners in the form of doré, is it possible that the military somehow is also doing that, have been doing that, and maybe have NDAs around that so that the mines are not reporting that?
Could be,
Yeah,
I mean, remember when the silver, first of all, I looked it up, and one of the more, and he's very smart and he's very good, and I don't really have many arguments with, I don't have, really argue with him much, but to my memory, when the Silver Eagle program started, was from the strategic silver stockpile, and I don't want to get in a word game, but he said it's not a strategic metal, and I distinctly remember that. So I looked it up and I found it. I didn't post it on my Twitter or anything. I really don't care if you call it strategic or not. That's what it was. And so the idea was we have all the silver laying around. What good is it? And one of the Congress critters decided, hey, we ought to float a bill and we ought to turn this into metal coins and sell to the public and make a profit. It's about the only government entity that actually does make a profit.
right.
So they went through and then initially said that we could only buy domestic silver. So it was kind of like this way back in the early days when silver was money. We're going to only use our domestic supply.
Right.
Well, they found out pretty quickly that we didn't have enough domestic supply to meet the demand for silver eagles. So then they changed the law. They said, okay, we can import silver for wherever we need it in order to meet demand. And of course, BIX has been the lead on this above and beyond anybody by far,
Yeah.
that the demand has far outstripped the supply on the mint for a long, long time. I mean, there have been, and I'm a little bit neutral. I mean, I don't disagree with BIX. They certainly haven't met the demand, but there was a time where the average take on a given year was 10 million ounces, and it got up to 20. Once silver got really popular, it got up to 40 million. It does take time to
Mhm.
get a new press and more employees and hook it up and all that. But they certainly have a greater capacity than what they're producing now.
Well, they did put these new mints online a couple of years ago, and they are not producing at capacity. And some would suggest that they might be producing at capacity and hoarding the silver and not selling it to the public. Guys, if you want to see some of those conversations that not Cliff, but Bix had with some of the Mint employees and also his research on the Cal neutrons, check him out here at roadtoruta.com. Let's get to the third point, which is the price of silver and gold and the manipulation. Coming out of this last COMEX meeting on October 22nd, I believe it was, Russia was proposing to put the COMEX and the LME, the London Metals Exchange, out of the market rigging business. Now, they were talking about other commodities. It wasn't just gold and silver, but for the focus of this conversation, let's look into that. That to me, I don't know about you, David, but it sounds like an act of war. Any other time in history, if you decide that you're going to be taking away the levers of control of the pricing mechanism here, it could spell disaster. Now, this didn't really make the mainstream news, although it's there for everybody to see. It's on Reuters. Maybe it was on a ticker tape somewhere at 6 o'clock during that particular day, but nobody's really followed up on the ramifications of this. What do you think those are moving forward? Are we close to that time where, as Cliff had predicted in some of his webbot data, that we would get to this breakdown of the silver manipulation scenarios? Where are we on the timeline, David?
Oh, no one knows a timeline. I mean, I've been off on that. I've thought, well, years ago, if we digress a bit, but there was a silver deficit. We're in a silver deficit right now. I think everybody that's in the silver world knows that if they pay any attention at all. So for the last 3 years or so, we have eaten up about 200 million ounces of above ground silver. And the only place that's come from is that's above ground in bar form, because the amount of mining and recycling is 1 billion ounces. But we're eating up 1.2 billion ounces. So that 0.2, that 200 million ounces, is coming from what's already stored above ground. And that happened for 3 years in a row. What's interesting about that is we did that for 15 years before. There's a couple of commentators out there that get it, and I am saying I get it right all the time. When I'm wrong, I try to promptly admit it. But someone wrote recently in one of these blogs that, we've never been in a silver deficit before. That's not true.
No,
From
it happened.
1990 to 2005, we were in a 100 million ounce deficit on an annual basis. It wasn't
And
100 million.
wasn't that when they were dismantling the Calutrons?
Could
It's
have
like,
been. I'm
right,
not sure.
right.
But what took place was we had 2 billion ounces above ground roughly. And at the end of that 15-year period, we had 500 million. So we ate up from the above ground stockpile, 2/3 or 3/4 of the supply. And you would think that would have a huge effect on price, but it didn't.
No,
If you look at stockpile versus price, came up, but nothing dramatic. But this time, I think it will have a much larger impact. First of all, the industrial use is more than double what it was then. And the awareness of silver is global. It was then, but not to the degree that it is now.
right.
And you didn't have the currency crisis uh, at the level that it is now. So I think that every, 200 million, 300, 400 million ounces that get gobbled up from the above ground supply will affect the market in a much more direct way than it did in the past. But I just want to point out that we've been in those dynamics. So you said, well, when? And so when I looked at that, I said, well, look, in theory, you'll run out of silver in another, 5 years. And of course we did, because from about the early 2000s, we went from mining 500 million ounces a year to the now present 850 million ounces a year. Why? Because the demand was there and China was building out their industrial revolution from 2000 to 2020. So for 20 years, they demanded more concrete, more lumber, more silver, more everything, copper, you name it. And so it was
Mhm.
a huge boom in the mining industry to produce more, and they did. And so then from 2006 till the last couple of years, the above ground stockpile's been building back. We went from that 500 million ounces to roughly probably 3 billion ounces now. So over that 2005 to 2025, like 19 years, or less than that, because it's been a deficit, as I just said, but for a good 16 years or so, we've added to the above ground supply of silver. But now that's reversed again.
And how's that affecting the recycling? For a lot of researchers, they're suggesting that this deficit is being filled, at least in part, with recycling silver. A lot of that has to do, of course, with pre 1968 or 65 in the States constitutional silver and tableware and all that stuff too. But it is putting a dent in the supply of constitutional silver also. Is that a big part of where they're getting it? Or is there also perhaps a strategic pile that we just don't know about yet?
Well, there's always the idea of that. I've thought of that myself. I can't prove it.
Yeah.
You don't know, so that's an unknown. But as far as recycling goes, it is 100. Excuse the dog.
Hey, while David's dog is barking there, let me play a quick promo from Andy Scheckman here on Constitutional Silver. Here we go.
Hey guys, it's Andy Scheckman here. I'm watching the Silver Gold Rush with JEAN-CLAUDE and my good buddy David Morgan. Hope you guys are enjoying the show. As a special thank you to the Beyond Mystic audience, I'm pleased to offer you pre-1965 constitutional junk silver at $1.89 over silver spot. That's the lowest price you'll find anywhere, period. Check out beyondmystic.net/silver and fill out the form to get your silver now. Now back to the show. Hey, David. Hey, JC.
Thank you, Andy, for that. I appreciate that. Guys, check it out at beyondmystic.net/silver. I'll bring the link down in the box below. No need to use a coupon code, but if you fill out the form there, you'll get your silver there at 189, the constitutional junk silver at 189 over spot. Very hard price to beat, indeed. Going back to the question, David, back to you. Oh, you're muted on your side. Hold on, let me unmute you.
The FedEx guy is running away from my dog barking. Sorry about that.
That's okay. So,
yeah, I remember the question. No, so
you were saying yes,
yeah.
maybe we can't prove it. There might be a strategic stockpile somewhere, and the recycling. How does that tell you?
The recycling, so the recycling is 150 million ounces a year, which is pretty significant. I mean, if it's 1 billion ounces overall market, 850 is mining, 150 is recycling, then that's what 15% of the market. But it could be a lot higher. There's a lot of silver that still makes it to the landfill. What's interesting about your sub question was, what about teapots and silverware and jewelry and constitutional silver. You know, the bag market that Andy just talked about is a very small market.
Hmm.
There's just so much of that silver has been melted down and
Yeah.
re-refined. There's
Yeah.
just not. And what's interesting about the bag
Just
market,
oh, sorry to interrupt you, but just so you know, here in Canada, finding junk silver is almost impossible. Anything in quantity anymore, like it's very hard to find. They're still available. Andy still has some, but in Canada, it's really for the last 2 years, really, it's hard to get your hand on it. So I agree with you. It's going to remelt and never to be seen again.
yeah, you won't, you know, that's why the silver dollars, even if they're, you know, very circulated, still have a high premium on them because there's just not that many left. And they didn't melt down a lot of those, but some were.
Yeah.
But the quarters and dimes and halves have been melted down, the great quantities of them. But
Yeah.
what's interesting about the bag market is it's such a thin market because when you get into the barter mentality, I call it, you get a huge premium. When the Y2K scare came out, the bag market had about a 40% premium on it. So when you find that, really it's smart to sell the bags or trade it or swap it for bars because the premium when things stabilize usually comes off. So that
Mhm.
for and a bag market can usually trades at a slight discount. So uh, so there's an arbitrage opportunity there at times. But
Mhm.
I've always asked people to consider getting a, you know, a bag per family or whatever, depends on their means and, you know, what they believe about, you know, future sound money. But it's really is a very small market. And I want to go one step further. Most people don't know this, but you go to the early days of when gold traded in the commodities market and silver traded in the commodities market. It wasn't always that way, but when the silver market opened up, they had two markets. They had a silver bullion market, which we still have, which is your 1,000 ounce bars. But we also had a silver bag market. And so you could actually, I think the bag market was 5 bags of silver,
Hmm.
which is $5,000 face value, which today would be roughly 10 times that amount.
Yeah.
So what happened was there would be some arbitrage between bags and bars. But here's the point I want to get at, just sort of an anecdote. So Bunker Hunt did a lot in the futures market with his brother Herbert, but they also bought a lot of physical. And if you read Silver Bulls behind me here, in that book, the exchange was due to deliver him silver, but the exchange didn't have enough bullion to meet his delivery demand.
So they gave him the bags of
So
coins?
they asked him if would he accept bags as a substitute, and he said yes.
Fuck yeah.
And if he would have said no, it would have been interesting to see what, you know, could have, might have, should have happened.
Right.
Just a
Speaking of that, I think probably 2005 or 6, I found here in Canada on one of those estate forums. There was like people who sell houses of people who are deceased, and they put everything together. Anyways, there was a list of silver coins, and so I went there to try to pick up a few, and I realized that this person had worked at the Royal Canadian Bank and still had some bags sealed from the 60s with quarters and 50s. And so I remember buying one of those two of those bags, not a lot, but I was just like, whoa, that's a piece of memory you don't find. And they're still to this day still sealed. I haven't opened those bags. I don't even know if there's rocks in there, but
yeah,
it did sound like silver. But I couldn't break the seal or bring myself to break the seal. I thought I'd keep that as a surprise. So if ever I open the bag, I'll let you know if there
yeah,
was actually
yeah.
silver in there. But they did have a lot of real silver that people could see, and it was all part of the collection. And the fact that it was documented that this person had worked at the Bank of Canada in those days, and they could have had access to that. So at any rate, we'll see. So going back to this price manipulation and the fact that the comex seems to be, that Russia seems to be putting in their sights comex and the LME and perhaps other exchanges here into their crosshairs and perhaps wanting to take control of the levers here for the pricing mechanism. I wanted to bring this up. I talked to Cliff. This was almost a month ago. This was a show for, I think it was a Wacky Woo with Big Swear. And I had asked Cliff to see if he had any new data on silver coming up. And so this data would have been accumulated, I believe, in August or September. And at the time that he gave me what's on the screen there, guys, the cross links to the data had not yet been performed. So we had given a caveat that, okay, there's data coming in, there's a lot of it. He said there's more than 20,000 references to gold and silver in that particular run. So there's a huge spike in language coming around gold and silver here. So this is the short-term to medium-term data. And so here he had some dates around November 7 being perhaps the instigator to all of this happening. So we have the election a couple of days before, and whatever is happening in the background now could be setting the stage for some of these headlines. So with that said, and with those caveats and said, haven't been said, I want to share with you some of these headlines. One of them was gold breaks and Japan and silver crisis. Ratio breaks, Japan, silver crisis, Japan, Russia, silver, breaks gold freeze, more Russia, plus language about Russia, war with Russia on silver riggers. Well, you see how that data did manifest here with the announcement from Russia that they're going after the comex and the LME. We then get into unobtainium also as a word coming up here for silver. So I don't know if that's because something happens at the exchange level to where we don't know what the price is. Is there a big freeze somewhere? Does this have to do with the banks shorting silver, having to cover all of a sudden and the whole system breaking down? Does it have to do with Trump maybe announcing a gold back standard? Who knows? But a lot of language here is coming up in the data. So I wanted to ping you on all of this. Like, where do you see this happening? Why is silver? Why is Japan in there? I get the
Well, I really wish I knew. It was funny because it flagged an old memory of mine. I got it from one of my commodities brokers years ago, probably 20 or more. And it had a map of the world and it had all this silver for Japan. And I think really it was because of the auto industry. I mean, there was a time when, everybody wanted to own a Honda or a Toyota, I mean, that was the dominant auto manufacturing. It might have been that, not that there's that much silver in an automobile in those days. But there was just the industrial engine at that time wasn't China, it was Japan. And I gut level, that's the best answer I could come up with. I really wish I would have, saved that or had a better memory on why that is. Really stumped me. I mean, I thought about it all night and I really don't have an answer for you. There could be something technologically that they've got that no one else has that we just don't know about yet, would be my best guess.
Or it's some type of shock to their financial system. If you
Or
listen to Bill Holter and Jim Sinclair, maybe 10 years ago, they were proffering that if this tsunami of debt defaults could start, it could start in the East. And they had talked about Japan in there. And maybe some of that could be tied somewhere to silver and exposing something. I don't know. Does that ring a bell?
well, I'll tell you, this is an anecdote again, but one of the early speeches I gave was in Canada at the World Outlook Conference. And I went through the whole silver story and I got done. It was right before lunch. And a lot of Canadians came up to me and said, "Hey, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong." I said, "Wrong about what? These are all facts and none of this is my opinion." I said, "Well, Marty says that silver is a short." Marty said, "Who's Marty?" I mean, these people like this guy is like the number one. Like, I mean, you don't mess with Marty Armstrong. Oh, Martin Armstrong. First time I heard his name, I didn't know about Princeton economics or any of that stuff.
Yeah.
And as far as I understood it, so I could be wrong, so I'll give it that caveat. He was heavily involved at that time in not only shorting silver, but with the Japanese. So this comes right full circle back to you, Jean-Claude, where who knows? Maybe they got a big short on with one of their major banks or industrial leaders or whatever. There's so much easy money to short silver. And maybe there's something still exists like that. I doubt it. But you don't know. And we certainly can't rule it out.
Well, that's interesting too. Cliff was saying secrets revealed at the financial level. We have no idea here what we're talking about. How do we tie in perhaps Berkshire Hathaway being in cash position, increasing their cash positions over the last months, selling their BofA stocks? Is it perhaps because BofA is also a Bank of America, also in this big silver short position? And are they doing that perhaps on behalf of a client? For example, Japan? Could that tie in?
Wouldn't
Yeah.
rule it out. And as far as, I just saw an article last night about, Berkshire left $40 billion on the table because they sold early. Look, there's one thing I know, it's markets. That doesn't mean, I'm the best trader in the world, but I understand markets. And the first thing you want to do is when you're going to exit a market is you want to sell in the strength and you want to leave some for the other guy.
Yeah.
In other words, you don't want to pick the top.
Yeah.
If you pick the top, you're the last seller
Yeah.
and there's no buyers. And now the market falls down rapidly. So you want to leave some cream at the top for the next guy. So Buffett did exactly the right thing to get a huge cash position. And you sell out in tranches. You can't sell your whole position. They're huge.
Yeah.
You sell it, putting up that much, offering that much stock or that many cows or that many real estate buildings at one time is going to drop the market substantially. So you have to, accumulate slowly and distribute slowly or relatively slowly for your position. And that's exactly what he's done. So as far as I'm concerned, he's played it perfectly well. Coming back to silver, I think he's been scolded enough times because he loves silver, although he never gets questioned about it. He downplays gold. Gold's a pet,
Yeah.
Gold's just a commodity. Why would you hold it? But they never ask him, well, if you hate gold so much, why are you always in the silver market, Mr. Buffett? But no one has the guts to ask him.
Yeah. Who knows? Anyway, maybe he'll come on the show and you and I can ask him sometime.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I just put out on a tweet, you might have seen it. I follow a lot of yours. I can't read them all, but that his cash position now is 10 times the annual silver market.
Yeah. Could you imagine?
Yeah.
Like one small move and that's done. Okay, let's talk about the dollar and what's been happening here with its relationship with gold. Gold hits an all-time high. This was a couple of weeks ago. We're now seeing a little bit of a correction in gold and silver, but let me read this and I want to have your take on this. Gold hits a new all-time high as dollar surge continues, an unprecedented divergence in the traditional inverse relationship. Something's broken in the background. What do you think that is, David? What just happened here?
Well, I've said for years that using the extra pyramid that the dollar at the end of the great inflation, you will see gold and the dollar move together. And this is taking place. So if you go to the extra pyramid, I don't know if you could pull that up or not.
Yep.
But it's an upside down pyramid. And what it shows is a liquidity squeeze. So as people get scared, they go to more and more what they trust. They don't trust derivatives. They don't trust commercial real estate. So, they trust it less. They don't trust the corporate bond market as much. Government bond market, yeah, I trust that. But I trust paper money the most. And then I also trust gold more than I trust paper money. So what you'll see as the liquidity comes down this pyramid, the two things that are trusted most are physical notes, those pieces of paper, and gold, and really silver as well. Silver is really the tip of the pyramid, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And so, and that is an indication of how close we are to the end game. But Rafi Farber always, and I like his, the end game investor.
Yeah.
And that's proof to me that we're nearing the end game. And, the late, great Ian McAvity and some of these guys that I learned a lot from were the anti-dollar. In fact, I remember Ian McAvity, before we had PowerPoints, we used overhead projectors. You probably don't even know what that is. But he took a chart on a vellum that was a gold chart, and then he took one on a vellum that was a dollar chart, and then he reversed it and he laid them on top of each other, and they're almost exactly the same, that gold's the anti-dollar. And that's true for a lot of history, but not now. So that's the point. I think it's a very important one. I'm glad you brought it up because, so that goes back to when David. And the answer is, I don't know. I'll give that honest answer, but I'll tell you this, a lot closer than we've been, because that is one of the best proofs that I have that's how close we are.
All vectors or all of this information is vectoring to the same conclusion. I agree with you. The when, though, is still up in the air, but at the same time, if you're paying attention, universe has the tendency to speak with you. And this was interesting. I don't know if you saw this. This is a post on Gold Telegraph as the Secretary Janet Yellen was asked about her concerns over the US dollar status in the world reserve currency. She started answering, and just as she started to talk, the logo fell off her podium, and I was like, wow, what perfect timing. And of course, how strong is the dollar, and her logo falls off the podium. What do you make of the timing of that?
I think it's a God shot. I mean, it couldn't be more perfect. I mean, you
Yeah.
talk about the universe lining up perfectly to say, bullshit, bullshit. Couldn't have been
Oh,
better.
I loved it too. Guys, you can find that clip on my Twitter. That's hilarious. So we're already at the hour mark. We have a few more minutes to discuss a few things here. And David, before we wrap up, I wanted to look at the banking level. So one thing that I've been tracking, and many of you, and I know you are also, are these unrealized losses here that are about 7 times, maybe 8 times larger than they were in 2008. And having this conversation with Andy again on the Beyond the Vault episode a couple of weeks ago, he was suggesting that there could be a problem here after the election, and there's the potential for a big disaster. And he explained how the Fed had this lending program for the banks here over the last year to kind of create a buffer, I guess, with this liquidity issue and this unrealized losses situation at the banking level, and that those loans are in fact due here after the election. So whether the day after or 2 days after, but there was a potential there for this program to be ended and to be pulled back to where these loans would be called back, creating perhaps a cascading effect here at the banking level. There was an article or an interview, sorry, with Alex Jones and this fellow here saying that, yeah, we're on that verge now, and that lever could in fact be pulled depending here on who's still in control of that, how much damage they want to do to this new incoming presidency. What are your thoughts on that? First of all, the stability of the banking level and the fact that this mere little unrealized losses and the banking program that is keeping it at bay could be pulled out from under your feet here at any moment. David?
Well, the instability of the banking system is inherent in the way it's structured. I mean, fractional reserve, it goes back again to the goldsmiths. I mean, if you only have to have 1/10 of what is on deposit and you're in compliance with the regulators and everybody came to get their gold, then you'd only have 10% for everybody.
Mhm.
Same thing in the banking system. And the reserves aren't even nearly that high. I mean, it's more like 1%. So that instability is inherent in the system. Why doesn't it happen? Well, because people don't deal in cash. And what do you do with your money out of the bank? I mean, first of all, to get cash out of the bank is a real cumbersome chore, and they're not going to give you that much. So, but that's step number one. Step number two, with this gentleman Elliott that you just showed, I mean, it's very possible that there'll be a trigger of some type. Whether it's that one or not, I don't know. That could be one. But I think it's important to point out what a callable loan is. And a callable loan is that you don't have loan could be called at any time. So if you have an auto loan, for example, and it's a callable loan, it may be in the fine print and you don't know it. So you borrow $25,000 for your automobile, you put 10,000 down for it, and you make payments for 2 years, and then the bank calls you up and says, you owe us $19,827. And said, yeah, I know, but I'm making my monthly payments. We don't care. We're calling the loan now.
Yeah.
And I doubt very many auto loans are callable. I'm just doing an example. But during the 30s, many of the real estate loans were callable. And it wasn't that these people couldn't buy their farms, it's that they couldn't get their money at the bank. I mean, there were instances in the 30s where people had enough on deposit at the bank to pay off their farm and still had their farms taken from them because it was a callable loan and their bank had failed and they couldn't get their money. And
Sorry
I
for your
think one
luck.
of the most important interviews I've done goes back to Greg Hunter and Daniela Cambone when I did that big, interview about bail-ins. And that's the bail-in situation. You
Yeah.
could have over 250,000 in the US bank and you think it's your money. It's not. It's their money. And if they needed to keep the bank solvent, they'll take what you thought was your money, which legally is their money, and give you stock in the bank. But when you get equity in the bank, so far the return has been 5 cents on the dollar. So
Ouch.
if
That's
you
a big
got
haircut. That's a big haircut, David.
a big haircut.
Yeah.
So this is something about the liquidity squeeze, going back to the extra pyramid, that
Mhm.
as you go down that pyramid, you don't want to be in that derivative. You don't want to be in that swap. You don't want to be in the repo market. You don't want to see this repo facility that's keeping liquid the banking system that had excess deposits, putting them overnight at the Fed because it's the safest place and highest interest rate. I mean,
Right.
it's like, loaning money to your uncle that gives you a better rate than the bank will and getting it back every night. I mean, it's not a scam, but it's a sweet deal for the banks that have excess reserves. When that dries up or anything else, I mean, I've thought about, in fact, I just listened to a interview with Jim Rickards, and he said something similar to what I've been saying. He probably said it a little more eloquently, but I've often thought about the bond market, which is the keys of the kingdom. Everything's on the credit and debt markets. Then a bond trader and one of the major banks starts to sell more U.S. debt, for cash than they normally do. And it's not like a huge amount, but it's enough to maybe raise an eyebrow of somebody in Switzerland at their desk. I don't know what the Japanese know that I don't know, but you know what? That bond market's starting to increase in yield because the Japanese are selling off. What if they know something? I'm a little suspicious. So he sells a little bit more than normal. And then the Bank of England takes a look at it and says, oh my God, what do the Japanese know and the Swiss know that I don't know, man? They're really dumping the U.S. Treasury today. You know what? I'm going to lighten my position. So you see where it's something kind of innocently started by one goes to many because of a perception that may not even be valid. But, that's just getting out of the bond market. I'm going to lighten my position. I don't want to be stuck with the old maid. So that's how fragile the system really is. But no one really stops to think about it very often because we all take for granted that, we've got our debit card. We go to Starbucks tomorrow. We're going to get our, custom latte with, this squeeze and that squeeze and squeeze a lime and all this stuff that goes on in our whack.
And don't worry, the FDIC will insure your deposit. Don't worry, everything's fine. Speaking of, thank you for that, David. Speaking of James Rickards, I wanted to bring this up. He wrote this article on October 28th. The golden rule is real. I thought this was fascinating. I want to have your quick take on this, and then I'm going to ask you a question about Bitcoin, and we're almost done. But here he's talking about the nations in the BRICS ecosystem starting to trade locally with their currencies. And in a way to offset perhaps some of the mitigating factors of doing that, as opposed to holding the world reserve currency, the US dollar, they might be holding bigger reserves in gold. So he says, in a way, we are kind of already leaning into some type of a gold-backed system. What did you make of that opinion piece here? Have you read this article, and what do you make of that opinion?
Yeah, I agree with it. I don't recall if I've read it or not, but I'm going to be interviewing Judy Shelton later this week. And she wrote the book, Good as Gold. I read it. And I also listened to a few of her interviews, but she's advocating to put gold back into the system, not directly, but tying to actually, she's talking about a long bond or a 50-year bond that's payable in either US dollars or gold. And it's a way to reintroduce the stability of gold into the financial system. So I have a lot of questions about that. But I think that the history speaks very loudly. We go from a fiat failure to back to gold, fiat failure back to gold. That's really a very broad brush view, but it's a pretty accurate one.
Yeah.
So we go from an instability, a system that can't be trusted, that fails, and we go back to a gold standard or close to it. So I don't know if it's inevitable. History says it is. I have my doubts based upon, what I'm speaking about, the New Orleans conference. What does a new monetary system look like?
Right.
And I will outline what I think based on all the information I've been able to obtain. The central bank authorities, the BIS, want it to look like. And Mr. Carney's right at the top of the pile there. But basically it's a CBDC, which, I'm sure you've discussed many times as well as me. But that's what they're pushing for. Doesn't necessarily mean it'll happen.
No, and Trump said he wouldn't let a CBDC take place here in the United States, so creating perhaps an outlier and then some alternative measures being brought forward. And as soon as there's one crack in that shield, then that wedge can open up and get into more competition. And that's kind of what we're seeing with the BRICS. That's kind of what we're seeing with the crypto. Before I ask you a question on crypto here, I wanted to invite the audience members to go and subscribe to your YouTube channel here if they want to see more of your amazing interviews. Guys, you can find that here at The Morgan Report. No, actually, is it Civil Guru? It's at
the MorganReport.com.
Yeah.
Um,
The
and
YouTube channel is at Silver Guru. Is that correct? I think
yeah,
what it is.
that's
Where you can see your videos.
Yeah.
Okay, so guys, I'm going to bring a link down to the live chat for that too, if you want to go subscribe and see Davis's work there on his YouTube channel. Okay, we're almost there. So Bitcoin versus CBDCs, the spiritual battle. I know you and I have had a conversation about this before, for the soul of humanity. So we're very much here at the footstep of this particular battle. As I said here, Trump seems to be wanting to make the USA some type of leading edge technology bastion for the world here in terms of cryptocurrencies. He's against installing CBDCs, and he's for creating this Bitcoin strategic reserve. Now, in the WebBot data reports, well, this is a I can't do this video without saying this. This was Kramer, of course, telling people they were stupid to buy Bitcoin at $16,000. I played a clip, but you guys, there's many of these out there. But going back to Cliff's reports, there was these 100K parties way back when it wasn't even thinkable to say that the Bitcoin was at 100,000. Well, we just breached that just last week here in Canada in Canadian dollars. Or I think we're at 110 or something. Last night when I checked, we're at 80,000 or 86,000 now on the USD market. Now, what do you make of crypto in the scenario you just talked about here, where we ultimately go back to some type of sound money? Now that there's an alternative with crypto, are we going to see like this battle go on for quite some time? Do you think we're going to see gold and silver, or perhaps a tri-metallic kind of system in between here before we decide what we want to do with crypto? There's still this war between the centralized and decentralized world of crypto. What do you make of all this? Where do we go with the advent of this escape valve, so to speak, here?
Yeah, I've thought about it, and this is just my thoughts. And probably for the last 10 years, I've looked at sound money, gold and silver, even when it's tied to the blockchain, which there are several, as a transition. I think it'll be a transition. I don't think it'll be the end product, but that's my thoughts. So going back to, maybe I just contradicted myself. Well, David, wait a minute. You said the new monetary system will be CBDC. I said that's what they want. If that fails or is not accepted, then what will they do? They'll probably do some type of tie to gold.
Right.
And with that, will it be central bank digital currency? Well, not if it's has to go through Congress, and Congress is voting against it. So then what happens? Well, then a private entity like JP Morgan comes up with not a central bank digital currency, but a JPM token that's gold backed.
Right.
So now it's a private currency. And now Amazon has one. And now, so we could be in a situation where and I'm for competing currencies. I'm just not for lack of integrity or lack of honesty. But so I think we could see.
You're for disintermediation and decentralization of currency.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Money should be free.
Yeah.
And money should be of the people, not of the government.
Right.
It should be where we have the power and they don't. Because if you believe what I believe, and money is power, then you can control the political class.
Yeah.
You can control the unions. You can control the movie industry. I mean, you can control almost anything, because most people will sell out for a great deal of money. And those that won't sell out usually can be manipulated anyway, because they've got to eat. Yeah. So it's a very immoral system in a long ways. It should be a neutral thing, like a commodity that's proven to be the best for humanity. Is it perfect? No, but it's the best that we have. And that's really a bi or trimetallic standard, because you can't measure gold and paper only, because it could go to infinity.
Right.
But if you have to measure gold in terms of silver, there's a limited supply of gold and silver every year, and one can be dug out of the ground faster than the other, or more quantity of it. But it's kind of a checks and balance on the system. So I think it could be a transition, is my guess. I really think, having thought this through more and more, as we see the roadblocks going to a central bank digital currency, that they could just rename it. It'll be a private enterprise. This big public-private enterprise thing that we hear all the time, where it's really a pseudonym for government control with a private, face on it. But so that's where I think we're most likely to go. I really would like to see, again, the power of the money system back in the hands of people, but it's doubtful. These bankers seldom lose these wars. Right. They usually come out on top. but we do have the opportunity to do it. And
I think that's probably the quote of the night. We have the opportunity. I think what just happened last week shows us that when we bring our minds together, our souls together, our spirits together, and in terms of wanting freedom, better economy, more transparency, less censorship, we did make an effect last week. Although that's just here in the United States, I would say that that is probably going to have a bigger effect around the world as we move forward here towards other election cycles in other jurisdictions. So I think we can do it if we're here together. I think the point of these particular shows is to try to navigate all of this moving forward, and just maybe on the words of wisdom here moving out, like if there is going to be a transition period and we are going to look at some crypto and there might be some unintended consequences here in this battle royale for the people who are just trying to best navigate this, what would you say? Do they go in cold?
I'd say you have to have real money, and if you want crypto, that's fine. The problem with crypto, in my view, is that it's high tech. We want low tech.
Mhm.
You want, in the worst case scenario, where you take out that 70% silver coin from that bag you bought from that estate sale, and the guy instantly recognizes it and is going to give you some gasoline so you can get down the road.
Yeah.
Whereas you might give them a tip in Bitcoin, but if your phone system's down, how are you going to do it?
Mhm.
I know you could peer to peer and you could write a number on a wallet and all that, but how is he going to trust you? You give him, here it is, trust me, So I think there's a purpose for both.
Yeah.
I wouldn't advocate one or the other. I mean, I'm not in the camp of one or the other. I'm in.
And also, we have to say also that cash might be king for a period of time, as we
Good.
saw during the natural disasters in North Carolina. Cash was king. Silver was king too. Like a lot of people were trading in local currencies, and that's why we really love the constitutional silver, or as we call the junk silver. Guys, one last time, if you're looking for that, go to beyondmystic.net/silver. Just fill out the form here and get this 189 over spot for junk while supplies last. David, before I let you go, for people who are interested in maybe digging a little bit deeper here and understanding the history behind all of this and where all of this is going, what do you have for them here at themorganreport.com?
Yeah, we've got I've really two services. I have a free newsletter that comes out 2 or 3 times a week. Any interviews I do like this in the public domain, we publish and send out to everybody. Also give some offers on coins sometimes, other things. And then I have a paid service. It's under the subscription tab. There are members options rather. I do consulting if you want. It goes in streaks. I've went probably 2 years without doing a single consultation. Then, we had some banking problems not that long ago, and I got like 3 in 1 month. So the blog is free. The books.
Don't go too fast for the consultations. If people are having an issue, like they're planning for their retirement, is that what you mean? Like you offer?
Here I got 3 in 1 month, and all of them are basically the same. Hey, David, I own a business. I've saved a lot of money. I've got over $1 million in the bank. I'm scared to death of, a bail-in. I
Right.
listened to you for the last 5 years. I've never talked to you. I want to buy gold, and I don't want to make a mistake.
How do I
Who
do
do
that?
I buy it from, and where do I store it?
Right.
And basically, it was like 1 million, 5 million, and more than that.
Right.
And I line these people up with, the correct. It's always about the client.
Right.
So I give them what they want, and I give them options, and then they can decide for themselves. And so that's sometimes it's retirement. Hey, I've got this. I'm finally free. I've got all this in, municipal bonds because that's all I could do with my employer. Now I can direct it. I want a safe and sound, gold IRA. Should I buy silver? I'm, 65. And so we discuss, what my guidance would be on that type of thing. So it kind of goes all over the board. I had one guy write, and he had some limited partnerships in the oil and gas industry, which I know a little bit about, but I couldn't help him. I just wrote him back. I said, had you called and paid for the consultation, I always go like 10 minutes. And if I determine that I cannot be of value to them, I just refund their money. That doesn't happen very often, but it does because, they're paying me. So, and if you are a member, the consultations are half price.
Okay.
So I don't have that many members that want to talk to me, but some do. And of course, half price is a pretty nice cut. And there's some people that go over kind of their legacy planning for their family. on an annual basis. Like, hey, I've really gotten a good run on this stock that you recommended. Should I lighten up? Should I add to it? What do you think? That kind of stuff. So it hits, but it's mostly around the resource industry, gold,
Okay.
silver, that type of stuff.
Well, that's very good and very needed at this point. There's a lot of confusion, and I think more and more people now are realizing that they were lied to at the mainstream news, where they were watching the so-called experts on the 6 o'clock news, and now they're looking for alternatives. So, guys, if you're interested in that, please do go check it out here at themorganreport.com. Last question before I go: do you have any of these hard copies left anywhere, David?
I got a coin dealer in the United States that just bought. He's going to print 250, I think, and
I want one.
okay,
I want one
I'll
with your signature on it.
I want to, if you don't mind, we get this thing. I brought it up on my PDF file. The manipulation thing. Now, I've got friends that yes, there is manipulation, and I've got friends that are very, very close to me that say there isn't. You're wrong. But in that book, on page 99, we wrote, I think, a lead pipe cinch to prove that there is manipulation. And it reads like this. I'm not trying to go over anyone's head here. It's pretty basic. When we advocates of return-based analysis argue that it's easy to generate large gains and large losses with a high level of risk. Similarly, it is difficult to generate large gains and large losses with a low level of risk. One popular risk-adjusted measure is the Sharpe ratio, developed by Nobel-winning economist William Sharpe. The Sharpe ratio equals the average return divided by the standard deviation of returns. A high Sharpe ratio means the average return is high given the level of risk. Frauds and manipulations have high Sharpe ratios. For instance, Bernie Madoff's Sharpe ratio is 133, while the benchmark Sharpe ratio in the stock market was 19%. You got are you bolted down to your seat right now?
Yep.
Because remember,
I'm bracing.
Madoff was 133%. The table below shows gold's overnight and intraday Sharpe ratio at different times periods. In the year 2000, 167%. So, all right, my detractors, you tell me I'm wrong.
Yeah.
More than the Madoff Sharpe ratio, for crying. Sorry, I just had to get that in there because I get a little annoyed. And I'm not trying to be, right. I mean, I just want to be a good, solid, big-hearted, somewhat smart, working hard to give the truth. I mean, come on. 167.3 Sharpe's ratio. Crazy. Anyway, one more, if you don't mind bringing it up, silversunrise.tv.
Okay. Hey, let me see. Hold on. There you go.
So this is my documentary that I'm making with many others, and we've interviewed a lot of people.
Is that what you were talking to me about a couple of months ago? I connected you with okay, cool.
Yeah. So, the subset there talks about what it's really about, breaking free from the stress, fear, and control of money. So I've taken a bit of a spiritual look here, and I know Beyond Mystic looks at a lot of that stuff, JEAN-CLAUDE. And, after this movie's done, I'll send it to you one way or another, even if it's by DVD, so we can have a chat, because I love to have a chat with you. And I'd like to have some of your associates that do the readings and all that have a look into it as well, because really, I think we've got this thing upside down. We're so dependent on the financial system and money and what it means and security and all those things, when really we've got to be looking in the inside out. We are enough. Maybe we don't have enough, but we in and of ourselves basically are unbelievably special. You think, oh, I'm 1 out of 8 billion. Yeah, you are 1 out of 8 billion. Well, that doesn't make me special. No, you are special because you won the sperm race. You're 1 out of 100 million, and you hit the egg, and you're here for a reason. Right. And I just want to put in that, my philosophy, and I know you'll let me run here for a moment, but
sure.
I think we need to teach, our youth that they don't need to depend on everyone else, that authority should be questioned, that, look inside, all these things that we kind of lost from common sense sphere into this brave new world where we're always dependent on someone else telling us what to do. And as you know, and Cliff's probably done as much work as anybody, that they're gearing us for this hive mind.
Yeah.
Where we can't even think for ourselves. We all think alike and we all get along because we all think the same. Well, that's not what it's about. God made each one of us, whether you believe in God or nature, call it natural law. I don't care what you name it, call it the universe. But we're all there for a reason, and we're here for a reason in these very trying times. So probably overspoke it, but I'm really passionate about this. I felt that writing one more book wouldn't do it, but I felt that a movie might. So rather than put that effort into another book, I'm putting it into this document.
David, it's a date. When you're ready, send it over to me and we'll do a review together. We'll share it out with our audience members. I love this stuff. I love doing these documentary reviews. I've been doing some with Jay Widener, who also here on the show. So anytime you're ready, Dave, send it back to me here and we'll.
Yeah, if you mind mentioning to Jay, I'd love to learn a little bit about how to distribute this. I've watched his movie, The Kennedy X, and the last one, I just watched it last week, and fascinating about the Shining movie. Man, he goes deep.
Yeah, we're going to do a review on the Clockwork Shining here very shortly. Sure, I'll let him know. And you guys, do you already have his email? Do you want me to?
I had it once. I reached out to him once. He's very polite.
Okay, so I'll connect you through email right after the show.
Okay.
So yeah, big thank you, David, for being here today, guys. A big thank you for you guys joining the show and sharing all of your comments and your love. Please leave us a comment below here after the show. Let us know how we did and perhaps other topics you want us to follow up on the next Beyond the Vault edition. In the meantime, you can join us, of course, tomorrow night for the next edition of the Beyond the News. I'm Jean-Claude at Beyond Mystic. Again, please do go and check out David's work here at themorganreport.com. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and we'll see you soon. Au revoir.